The golden hues of dawn spilled through the sheer curtains of Sophia's Manhattan apartment, casting a soft glow on her reflection in the vanity mirror. At 27, Sophia was a vision of beauty, her rich ebony skin radiant, her curves full and unapologetic, her eyes sparkling with a warmth that could light up even the gloomiest of rooms. Her smile, wide and infectious, was her signature, a beacon of her vibrant spirit. A graduate of Columbia University, with a degree in literature, she had once dreamed of a life filled with poetry, love, and endless possibilities. But dreams, as she had learned, could be fragile things, easily shattered by the weight of reality. Sophia adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed the fabric. She was preparing for another day of pretending that her marriage to Daniel, the dashing millionaire she had fallen for 3 years ago, was still the fairy tale she had once believed it to be. Daniel, with his chiseled jaw, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could charm a room, had swept her off her feet in a whirlwind romance. He had been her knight in shining armor, promising her the world. But the man she married had vanished, replaced by a stranger whose coldness chilled her to the bone. The first year of their marriage had been a dream. Daniel had showered her with gifts, diamond earrings, designer gowns, trips to Paris and Santorini. They danced under starlit skies, laughed over candlelit dinners, and whispered promises of forever. But as the months passed, the warmth in his eyes faded, replaced by a hardness she couldn't understand. His words grew sharp, cutting like shards of glass. "You're too much, Sophia," he'd snap when she laughed too loudly. "Why can't you be more refined?" And then came the fists first, a shove, then a slap, each one chipping away at her spirit. She learned to shrink herself, to dim her light, to tiptoe around his temper. But love, she told herself, was worth the pain. Love could fix him. Love could fix them. This morning, though, something felt different. A heaviness hung in the air, a premonition she couldn't shake. Sophia glanced at the clock, 7:15 a.m. Daniel had left early for a business meeting, his tone curt as he kissed her forehead and rushed out the door. She sighed, brushing a curl from her face, and reached for her phone. A notification blinked on the screen, a message from Lisa, her best friend since college. Lisa, with her golden hair and easy grace, had been Sophia's rock through the storms of her marriage. The message was simple. "Meet me at Café Lumière, 8 a.m. Urgent." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Urgent Lisa was never one for dramatics. She grabbed her coat and headed out, the city's pulse matching the anxious rhythm in her chest. The streets of Manhattan buzzed with life taxis, honking pedestrians weaving through the morning rush, the scent of coffee and fresh bagels lingering in the air. Café Lumière was a quaint spot tucked between towering skyscrapers, its warm lights and cozy ambiance a haven for Sophia and Lisa's countless heart-to-hearts. When Sophia arrived, Lisa was already seated at their usual corner table, her face pale and her hands fidgeting with a napkin. "Soph," Lisa said, her voice trembling as she stood to hug her. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you." "Tell me what," Sophia asked, her stomach twisting. She sat down, her eyes searching Lisa's for answers. Lisa hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. "It's Daniel," she whispered. He's been seeing someone else." The words hit Sophia like a tidal wave, stealing her breath. She laughed, a brittle sound that echoed in the quiet cafe. "No, that's impossible." Daniel wouldn't. But Lisa's eyes, filled with guilt and pity, told her everything she needed to know. "Who?" Sophia demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Finally, she said, "It's me, Soph. I'm so sorry. It just happened." The world tilted. Sophia gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening. Lisa, her confidant, her sister in all but blood, had betrayed her. And Daniel, the man she had given her heart to, had tossed it aside like it meant nothing. The cafe seemed to shrink around her, the chatter of other patrons fading into a dull roar. She saw it all in her mind's eye, stolen glances, secret meetings, the lies they must have spun to keep her in the dark. Her heart, already bruised from Daniel's cruelty, shattered into a million pieces. How long, Sophia asked, her voice cold, unrecognizable even to herself. A few months, Lisa admitted, tears streaming down her face. I tried to end it, but he... Stop. Sophia held up a hand, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare make excuses. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You were my family, Lisa. And you... Her voice broke, but she refused to let the tears fall. You're nothing to me now. She turned and walked out, ignoring Lisa's desperate pleas. The city blurred around her, a kaleidoscope of lights and sounds she couldn't process. Her feet carried her back to the apartment, her mind racing. She saw Daniel's face in every shadow. His smirk when he called her names. His fist when he lost control. His lies when he swore he loved her. And now this, the ultimate betrayal. When she reached the apartment, Sophia didn't hesitate. She pulled a suitcase from the closet and began packing clothes, books, the few trinkets that still held pieces of her old self. The diamond earrings Daniel had given her lay untouched on the dresser. She wouldn't take anything that carried his stain. Her hands shook as she zipped the suitcase, but her resolve was ironclad. She couldn't stay here in this city, in this life that had become a prison. The divorce papers were the last thing she prepared. She sat at the kitchen table, the pen heavy in her hand, as she signed her name, Sophia Marie Jackson. Each stroke felt like a reclamation, a severing of the chains that bound her to Daniel. She left the papers on the counter, alongside her wedding ring, its once sparkling diamond, now dull in her eyes. A note accompanied it, simple and final. I'm done. Don't look for me. By noon, Sophia was at the bus station, her suitcase at her side. The city loomed behind her, a glittering cage she was finally escaping. She didn't know where she was going, not yet, but she knew it had to be far from here. As the bus pulled away, she pressed her forehead against the window, watching Manhattan fade into the distance. Tears finally fell, not from weakness, but from the weight of her liberation. She was broken, yes, but she was free. The road stretched ahead, endless and uncertain, but for the first time in years, Sophia felt a flicker of hope. Somewhere out there was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild what Daniel and Lisa had tried to destroy. She closed her eyes, letting the hum of the bus lull her into a fragile peace. This was her fateful day, the day she chose herself. The quaint town of Willow Creek, nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, where the air carried the scent of pine and the promise of new beginnings. For Sophia, it was a sanctuary, a place to mend the jagged pieces of her heart after leaving behind the wreckage of her marriage in Manhattan. At 27, she had arrived with little more than a suitcase and a resolve to rediscover herself. 2 years later, as she stood before a full-length mirror in her modest apartment, above the town's only bookstore, the woman staring back was a revelation, a phoenix risen from the ashes of her past. Sophia's new home was a far cry from the opulent penthouse she'd shared with Daniel. The apartment was small, with creaky wooden floors and a single window overlooking the town square, but it was hers. She had painted the walls a soft lavender, hung fairy lights, and filled the space with secondhand furniture that carried stories of their own. It was here, in this quiet corner of the world, that she began to rebuild. Her days found rhythm in the cozy embrace of Willow Creek Books, where she worked as a clerk. The bookstore, with its towering shelves and the faint musk of old pages, was a haven. Sophia spent her mornings arranging displays, recommending novels to curious customers, and losing herself in the worlds of Austen and Morrison. The owner, Mrs. Eleanor, a sprightly woman in her 60s with a penchant for peppermint tea, became an unexpected mentor. "You've got a spark, Sophia," she'd say, her eyes twinkling. "Don't let anyone dim it again." Those words, simple yet profound, became Sophia's mantra. The transformation began subtly. Sophia had always been beautiful, her ebony skin glowing with an inner warmth, her curves a testament to her vibrancy. But years of Daniel's cruelty had made her feel heavy, not just in body, but in spirit. In Willow Creek, she decided to reclaim both. She started with small changes, morning walks along the creek, where the water's gentle murmur soothed her soul. She traded late-night tears for yoga sessions in the town's community center, her body growing stronger with each pose. A local nutritionist, a kind woman named Clara, taught her to nourish herself with intention, crafting meals that were as vibrant as her spirit. The weight melted away, not because she sought to conform, but because she wanted to feel alive in her own skin. Her curves softened into elegant lines. Her movements gained a grace that turned heads in the town square. She cut her hair into a sleek bob that framed her face, accentuating her high cheekbones and luminous eyes. But it wasn't just her body that changed. It was her confidence, a quiet fire that burned brighter with each passing day. Sophia's thirst for growth extended beyond the physical. She enrolled in online courses diving into business management and leadership. Late nights were spent poring over textbooks, her mind alight with ideas. She dreamed of a career where she could shine not as someone's shadow, but as her own star. The bookstore became her classroom, where she practiced her skills organizing events, managing inventory, and even proposing a digital catalog that doubled the shop's online sales. Mrs. Eleanor watched with pride, calling her the heart of this place. Yet beneath her newfound strength, Sophia carried the scars of her past. Some nights she'd wake with Daniel's voice echoing in her mind, his insults, his betrayal with Lisa. Those memories stung, but they no longer defined her. She had learned to forgive herself for staying too long, for believing in a love that wasn't real. In Willow Creek, she discovered a truth: her worth was not tied to anyone else's validation. One crisp autumn evening, as leaves painted the town in shades of amber and crimson, Sophia sat on her apartment's tiny balcony, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands. The stars above seemed to whisper possibilities, and for the first time, she felt ready to chase them. Manhattan. The city that had broken her called her back, not as the wounded woman who had fled, but as someone new, someone unbreakable. She opened her laptop and began drafting her resume, her fingers steady as she typed. Novatech, a billion-dollar tech giant known for its innovation, was hiring a personal assistant. The role was a long shot, but Sophia's heart raced with determination. She was ready to return to claim her place in a world she had once run from. The decision wasn't easy. Willow Creek had given her peace, a community that embraced her without judgment. Leaving meant stepping into the unknown, risking the ghosts of her past. But Sophia was no longer the woman who cowered. She packed her belongings with care, tucking away the journals she'd filled with her thoughts, the yoga mat that had grounded her, and the books that had been her companions. Mrs. Eleanor gave her a parting gift, a leather-bound notebook with a note inside. "Write your own story, Sophia. The world is waiting." The bus ride back to Manhattan was a journey through time. Sophia watched the countryside give way to the city's skyline, its towering spires both daunting and exhilarating. She wore a tailored blazer and skirt, her hair sleek and her posture confident. The girl who had left 2 years ago was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who carried her scars like badges of survival. When the bus pulled into Port Authority, Sophia stepped onto the pavement, her heels clicking with purpose. The city's energy pulsed around her, but this time she wasn't overwhelmed. She checked into a modest hotel, her savings enough to tide her over until she landed the job. The next morning, she submitted her application to Novatech, her heart pounding as she hit send. The company's headquarters, a sleek glass tower, loomed in her mind, a symbol of the future she was determined to seize. As she waited for a response, Sophia wandered the city, rediscovering its rhythm. She sipped coffee at a corner cafe, her eyes tracing the faces of strangers, none of whom knew her story. She visited Central Park, where the autumn leaves reminded her of Willow Creek, grounding her in the courage she'd cultivated. Days later, an email arrived, an invitation to interview at Novatech. Her breath caught a mix of nerves and excitement. This was it, her chance to start anew. The night before the interview, Sophia stood before her hotel mirror, practicing her answers. She wore a deep emerald dress that hugged her transformed figure, its color a nod to the resilience she'd found. Her reflection was no longer that of a broken wife, but of a woman who had fought for herself and won. She smiled, her lips curving with a confidence that felt like armor. Tomorrow she would walk into Novatech not as a victim, but as a force. The city lights glittered outside her window, a constellation of possibilities. Sophia closed her eyes, imagining the interview, the questions, the moment she'd prove she belonged. 2 years ago, she had left Manhattan with nothing but pain. Now she was back, ready to write the next chapter, not just of survival, but of triumph. The morning sun glinted off the glass facade of Novatech's headquarters, a towering monolith of steel and ambition in the heart of Manhattan. Sophia stood at the base of the building, her heart a drumbeat of anticipation and nerves. At 29, she was no longer the broken woman who had fled this city 2 years ago. Her emerald dress hugged her newly sculpted figure, its vibrant hue a testament to the confidence she had cultivated in Willow Creek. Her sleek bob framed her face, accentuating the sharp intelligence in her ebony eyes. Today was her chance to claim a new chapter, to prove she belonged in a world she had once run from. She adjusted the strap of her leather satchel, her resume tucked safely inside, and took a deep breath. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, carrying the faint hum of the city taxis, honking heels, clicking the pulse of ambition. Sophia stepped through the revolving doors, the lobby's marble floors, and soaring atrium, greeting her with a grandeur that both intimidated and exhilarated. She was here for an interview, a shot at becoming the personal assistant to Novatech's CEO. It was a role that demanded precision, wit, and resilience, qualities she had honed in the quiet of a small-town bookstore. She was ready. The elevator bay was a flurry of activity, executives and interns weaving through the morning rush. Sophia pressed the button for the 42nd floor, where the interview would take place. As the doors slid open, she stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The elevator was empty, a moment of solitude to gather her thoughts. She closed her eyes, rehearsing her answers, her lips curving into a determined smile. This was her moment. The doors were about to close when a man rushed in, his presence a sudden whirlwind. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the urgency of someone who owned time itself. His navy suit was impeccably tailored, his dark hair slightly tousled, as if he'd just run a hand through it. In his haste, his phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. "Damn it," he muttered, bending to retrieve it. In that split second, his hand brushed against Sophia's hip, an accidental graze that sent a jolt through her. Her eyes flashed with indignation. She spun around her hand, acting before her mind could catch up. The slap echoed in the confined space, sharp and resounding. The man straightened, his hand flying to his cheek, his stormy gray eyes wide with shock. "What the hell was that for?" he demanded, his voice low, laced with a mix of confusion, and irritation. Sophia's chest heaved, her face flushed with righteous anger. "You know exactly what," she snapped, her voice cutting like a blade. "Keep your hands to yourself." "It was an accident," he said, his tone clipped, but the doors slid open before he could say more. Sophia stormed out, her heart pounding, not sparing him a glance. She didn't see the way his gaze lingered on her, a mix of intrigue and frustration, as she disappeared into the bustling corridor. Unbeknownst to her, the man was Nathan Caldwell, the 28-year-old CEO of Novatech. A billionaire prodigy, he was as known for his ruthless business acumen as for his striking looks. High cheekbones, a jawline carved from marble, and eyes that could pierce through pretense. His reputation preceded him, brilliant, cold, untouchable. Women vied for his attention. Men envied his power. But Nathan kept the world at arm's length, his heart guarded by walls forged from past betrayals. The incident in the elevator, however fleeting, had sparked something in him, a curiosity he couldn't shake. Sophia, oblivious to his identity, focused on calming her nerves as she approached the executive suite. The reception area was sleek, all glass and chrome, with a view of the city that made her breath catch. She checked in with the receptionist, a poised woman who offered her a glass of water. Sophia declined politely, her hands clasped tightly to steady them. The slap still echoed in her mind, a mix of embarrassment and defiance. She wasn't sorry she'd spent too long letting men cross her boundaries, but she hoped it wouldn't derail her focus. When her name was called, Sophia rose, smoothing her dress. The conference room was a study in modern elegance, its long table flanked by leather chairs, a wall of windows framing the Manhattan skyline. She expected a panel of interviewers, but only one man sat at the head of the table, his silhouette backlit by the morning light. As she stepped closer, her breath hitched. It was him, the man from the elevator. Nathan's eyes locked onto hers, a flicker of recognition passing between them. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable, though a faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Please have a seat." Sophia's heart sank, but she refused to show it. She sat, her posture impeccable, her chin lifted. If this was a test, she wouldn't fail. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her tone professional, though her pulse raced. She hadn't known his name in the elevator, but the weight of his presence now confirmed what she'd missed. This was no ordinary man. "I owe you an apology." Nathan began surprising her. His voice softened, though his gaze remained intense. "The incident in the elevator was unintentional. I hope you'll allow me to make amends." Sophia blinked, caught off guard by his candor. She nodded stiffly, unwilling to let her guard down. "Apology accepted," she said, her voice cool. "Shall we proceed with the interview?" Nathan's smirk widened, as if her defiance intrigued him. He gestured to the folder before him, her resume. "You have an impressive background, Ms. Jackson. Columbia graduate experience in management at a small business, and a glowing recommendation from a certain Mrs. Eleanor." "Tell me why Novatech." Sophia took a breath, her nerves steadying as she spoke. "Novatech is a leader in innovation, a company that doesn't just follow trends, but sets them. I want to be part of that vision, to contribute my skills in organization and strategy to help drive success. I'm not here to simply assist. I'm here to make a difference." Her words were bold, her delivery unwavering. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing her sincerity. He asked about her experience, her approach to challenges, her vision for the role. Sophia answered with clarity, drawing on her time in Willow Creek, her work at the bookstore, her studies in management, her ability to turn ideas into results. She spoke with a passion that lit up the room, her confidence a quiet force. Nathan listened, his pen poised over a notepad, though he wrote nothing. Her answers impressed him, but it was her presence that captivated him, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of her goals, the strength in her voice despite the earlier misunderstanding. He'd met countless candidates, but none carried themselves with such unyielding grace. As the interview drew to a close, Nathan leaned forward, his gaze locking onto hers. "You're not what I expected, Ms. Jackson," he said, his tone cryptic. "But I think you're exactly what Novatech needs." Sophia's heart skipped, though she kept her expression neutral. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. I look forward to proving you right." He stood, extending a hand. "You start Monday. Welcome to Novatech." She shook his hand, her grip firm, though the warmth of his touch sent an unexpected shiver through her. As she left the room, Nathan watched her go, a spark igniting in his chest. Sophia, unaware of the storm she'd stirred in the enigmatic CEO, walked back to the elevator, her heart soaring. She had done it, she had secured the job. But as the doors closed, she couldn't shake the memory of his eyes, stormy and unreadable, or the feeling that fate had just woven their paths together in ways she couldn't yet fathom. The conference room at Novatech's headquarters shimmered with the morning light filtering through its floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow across the polished mahogany table. Sophia sat rigidly in her chair, her emerald dress a vibrant contrast to the sleek, monochromatic decor. Her heart still raced from the interview, but it wasn't the questions or the stakes that unsettled her. It was the man seated across from her. Nathan Caldwell, the CEO of Novatech, was the same man she'd slapped in the elevator not 30 minutes ago. His stormy gray eyes, now fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, confirmed it. Fate, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. Sophia's mind replayed the elevator incident, his accidental touch, her fiery reaction, the sting of her hand against his cheek. She'd acted on instinct, a reflex born from years of guarding herself against men who crossed her boundaries. Now, as Nathan leaned back in his chair, his tailored suit accentuating his broad shoulders, she felt a mix of embarrassment and defiance. How could she have known he was the CEO? And yet his presence, commanding, magnetic, made it impossible to look away. "Ms. Jackson." Nathan began, his voice a low, velvety timbre that seemed to fill the room before we proceed. "I owe you an apology." He paused, his gaze softening just enough to catch her off guard. "The incident in the elevator was unintentional. I was careless, and I regret any discomfort I caused." Sophia blinked, her carefully constructed defenses wavering. His sincerity was disarming, but she wasn't ready to let her guard down. She nodded curtly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I appreciate that, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her tone cool but polite. "Let's move forward." Nathan's lips twitched, a faint smirk betraying his amusement at her resolve. He opened the folder before him, her resume crisp and annotated with his neat handwriting. "Your credentials are impressive," he said, his eyes scanning the page before meeting hers again. "Columbia graduate experience in small business management, and a recommendation that sings your praises. But what struck me most was your presence today, your confidence, your clarity. You're not just here for a job, are you?" Sophia's breath caught. His question felt like a challenge, an invitation to reveal more of herself. She straightened, her voice steady, despite the flutter in her chest. "I'm here to build something, Mr. Caldwell, to contribute to Novatech's vision while carving out my own path. I've learned that opportunities are earned, and I'm prepared to prove my worth." Her words hung in the air, bold and unapologetic. Nathan's expression remained unreadable, but a spark flickered in his eyes. Admiration, perhaps, or something deeper. He asked a series of questions, each one probing deeper into her skills and aspirations. Sophia answered with precision, drawing on her time in Willow Creek, where she'd transformed a quaint bookstore into a thriving community hub. She spoke of streamlining operations, crafting marketing campaigns, and mentoring younger staff, her passion illuminating her words. Nathan listened intently, his pen still, as if her voice alone commanded his attention. When the interview concluded, Nathan leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his tone deliberate, "I'd like to offer you the position of my personal assistant. It's a demanding role, long hours, high stakes, and a need for absolute precision. But I believe you're more than capable." Sophia's heart leapt though she kept her expression composed. The job was hers, a foothold in a world she'd fought to re-enter. But the memory of the elevator incident lingered, casting a shadow over her triumph. She didn't trust Nathan, not yet. His charm, his polished apology felt too practiced, too perfect. She'd learned the hard way that men like him, powerful, magnetic, could hide thorns beneath their allure. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice measured. "I accept the position. I'll ensure I meet your expectations." Nathan extended his hand, his grip firm yet warm as they shook. "I have no doubt you will," he said, his eyes holding hers a moment too long. Sophia pulled her hand back, ignoring the shiver that ran down her spine. She stood, offering a polite nod before turning to leave, her heels clicking against the marble floor. As the door closed behind her, she exhaled, a mix of relief and unease settling in her chest. She'd secured the job, but at what cost? Working for Nathan Caldwell felt like stepping into a storm, one she wasn't sure she could weather. The first week at Novatech was a whirlwind. Sophia's office was a sleek space adjacent to Nathan's, its glass walls offering little privacy but a stunning view of the city. Her role demanded she anticipate his needs, scheduling meetings, managing correspondence, and coordinating with department heads. She threw herself into the work, her meticulous nature shining through. She organized Nathan's chaotic calendar with surgical precision, streamlined his email inbox, and even suggested improvements to a project timeline that earned her a rare nod of approval from a senior executive. Nathan, however, was a puzzle. He was professional to a fault, his instructions clear and his demeanor cool. Yet there were moments, fleeting glances, a brush of his hand, when passing a document that hinted at something more. Sophia dismissed them as her imagination refusing to let her guard down. She kept their interactions strictly business. Her responses clipped her focus, unwavering. The elevator incident was a wall between them, and she wasn't ready to dismantle it. One afternoon, as she delivered a report to his office, Nathan looked up from his desk. His tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "Sophia," he said, using her first name for the first time, "you've been exceptional this week. Most assistants take months to adapt to my pace. You've done it in days." She paused, caught off guard by the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," she replied, her tone neutral. "I'm just doing my job." His lips curved into a half smile, as if her formality amused him. "Call me Nathan," he said, leaning back in his chair. "We'll be working closely. No need for such distance." Sophia hesitated, her instincts screaming caution. "I prefer to keep things professional, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice firm but polite. "It's how I work best." Nathan's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something disappointment perhaps crossing his face, but he nodded, respecting her boundary. "Very well," he said, "but know that I value your work, Sophia, and I hope in time you'll see I'm not the man you think I am." His words lingered as she left his office, a knot forming in her chest. She wanted to believe him, to see past the elevator incident and his reputation as a cold, untouchable billionaire. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not after Daniel, not after Lisa. She returned to her desk, burying herself in work, determined to keep Nathan at arm's length. Yet as the days passed, Sophia couldn't deny the pull of his presence. His voice, low and commanding, sent shivers down her spine when he called her into meetings. His rare smiles, reserved only for moments when she impressed him, stirred something she refused to name. She was here for a job, for a future she'd fought to reclaim. But Nathan Caldwell, with his stormy eyes and unspoken promises, was a complication she hadn't anticipated. As she left the office one evening, the city lights sparkling below Sophia felt the weight of her new life. She had seized an opportunity, but the misunderstanding with Nathan lingered like a shadow. Little did she know, fate was only beginning to unravel the threads that bound them, weaving a story neither could escape. The glass walls of Novatech's executive floor gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting the frenetic energy of a company that never slept. Sophia moved through her days with a precision that bordered on artistry, her desk a command center of schedules, reports, and strategic notes that kept Nathan Caldwell's world spinning smoothly. 3 weeks into her role as his personal assistant, she had mastered the chaos of his demands, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. Yet beneath her polished professionalism, a quiet tension simmered, a tension named Nathan. Sophia was determined to keep him at arm's length. The memory of their elevator encounter, though softened by his apology, lingered like a bruise. She didn't trust his charm, the way his stormy gray eyes seemed to see through her carefully constructed walls. Men like Nathan, powerful, magnetic, untouchable, were dangerous, their promises as fleeting as city rain. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, and she wasn't about to repeat it. So she kept their interactions crisp. Her responses measured, her focus unwavering. But Nathan, it seemed, had other plans. He was subtle at first, his approaches cloaked in the guise of work. A question about a report would linger into a discussion about her time in Willow Creek. His curiosity genuine as he leaned against her desk, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with quiet strength. "You turned a bookstore into a community hub," he'd said one afternoon, his voice low, almost teasing. "What's next?" "Sophia world domination." She'd laughed despite herself, the sound slipping out before she could catch it. Maybe she'd replied, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment. "But I'll start with keeping your calendar in check." His answering smile, rare and unguarded, sent a warmth through her that she quickly dismissed. She couldn't afford to let him in, not when her heart was still mending. Nathan's persistence was relentless, though never overt. He'd linger after meetings, asking her opinion on a new project or sharing a dry quip about a particularly tedious client. His humor, sharp and unexpected, caught her off guard. Coaxing smiles she didn't want to give. Sophia's wit matched his, her responses quick and laced with a playful edge that made his eyes light up. She hated how easy it felt, how his presence filled the room like a melody she couldn't stop humming. One late evening, as the office emptied and the city lights painted Manhattan in hues of gold and indigo, Nathan appeared at her desk, a stack of files in hand. "Sophia," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I need your input on the Q4 projections. Care to join me for dinner to discuss? There's a place nearby. Quiet, good food." Sophia paused, her pen hovering over a notepad. The invitation was framed as work, but the way he looked at her, his gaze lingering on her face, his lips curving into a half smile, betrayed something deeper. Her pulse quickened, a mix of caution and curiosity. "Dinner?" she repeated, her tone neutral. "Is this necessary? Mr. Caldwell?" "Nathan?" he corrected, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And yes, it's necessary. You're the only one who can keep up with my ideas. Plus, I hear their tiramisu is life-changing." She hesitated, her instincts warring. Saying yes felt like stepping onto a tightrope, but refusing might seem petty, unprofessional. She nodded, her expression guarded. "Fine, but it's strictly business." "Of course," he said, though the glint in his eyes suggested otherwise. The restaurant, a hidden gem, tucked between skyscrapers, was intimate, its candlelit tables casting a warm glow. Sophia sat across from Nathan, her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. The menu was a blur of elegant dishes, but she chose a simple pasta determined to keep the evening professional. Nathan, however, seemed intent on unraveling her defenses. He ordered a bottle of red wine. His movements relaxed, his demeanor almost boyish as he leaned forward. "So, Sophia," he began, swirling his glass, "tell me something about you that isn't on your resume." She arched a brow, deflecting with ease. "You've read my resume. That's more than enough." He chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Not nearly. I know you're brilliant, organized, and terrifyingly efficient. But what makes you... What do you love when you're not saving my schedule?" Sophia's fingers tightened around her fork. His questions were gentle, but they prodded at places she'd locked away. "Books," she said, finally, her voice softening. "I love stories the way they let you live 1,000 lives. And music. Jazz mostly. It feels like freedom." Nathan's eyes lit up as if she'd handed him a piece of a puzzle. "Jazz, huh? Miles Davis or Ella Fitzgerald?" "Both," she said, a small smile breaking through. "But if I had to choose Ella..." Her voice is like a warm hug. He nodded, his gaze holding hers. "I'll remember that." The conversation flowed, veering from music to travel, to the quirks of New York life. Sophia found herself relaxing, her laughter coming easier as Nathan shared stories of his early days at Novatech, his dry humor making her grin. But every so often his eyes would linger, their intensity stirring something in her chest, a spark she didn't want to name. When their food arrived, he watched her with a quiet attentiveness, as if memorizing the way she moved, the way she spoke. As dessert arrived, a tiramisu, they agreed to share. Nathan leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You're different, Sophia," he said, his tone earnest. "Most people try to impress me. You don't. You're just... you." Her breath caught the air between them, charged. She wanted to dismiss his words, to chalk them up to charm, but the sincerity in his eyes made her pause. "I'm here to do my job, Nathan," she said, her voice steady but softer. "That's all." He nodded, but his gaze didn't waver. For now, he said, a promise woven into the words. The walk back to the office was quiet, the city's hum a backdrop to their unspoken thoughts. Sophia kept her distance, her arms crossed against the cool night air. Nathan matched her pace, his presence a steady warmth at her side. When they reached the Novatech building, he paused, turning to face her. "Thank you for tonight," he said, his voice low. "It was more than I expected." Sophia met his gaze, her heart a tangle of caution and longing. "Good night, Nathan," she said, turning away before he could see the flush in her cheeks. Back in her hotel room, she stood by the window, the city sprawling below like a canvas of dreams. Nathan's words echoed in her mind, his eyes a memory she couldn't shake. She was here to rebuild, to prove herself. But as she closed her eyes, she felt the first stirrings of something new, a chemistry that threatened to unravel her carefully laid plans. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of Novatech's headquarters buzzed with the quiet intensity of a high-stakes meeting. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across the polished table where executives in tailored suits exchanged clipped remarks about market trends and quarterly projections. Sophia sat at Nathan's side, her tablet glowing with notes, her posture a study in poise. Her emerald blouse, paired with a sleek pencil skirt, accentuated the confident elegance she'd cultivated over the past 2 years. At 29, she was no longer the woman who had fled Manhattan in tears. She was a force, her presence commanding respect in a room full of power. As Nathan's personal assistant, Sophia had become indispensable. Her sharp mind and meticulous organization, earning nods from even the most skeptical board members. Today's meeting was crucial. A potential partnership with Apex Innovations, a rising tech firm with a reputation for bold moves. Nathan had tasked her with preparing the briefing, and she'd delivered her slides, a seamless blend of data and vision. She felt the weight of his trust, a quiet thrill that she refused to dwell on. Their dinner a week ago had left her unsettled, the memory of his intense gaze and velvet voice lingering like a song she couldn't shake. She pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. The double doors swung open, and the Apex team entered. Sophia's eyes flicked up, scanning the newcomers with professional detachment until they landed on him. Daniel, her ex-husband. Her breath caught a cold fist tightening in her chest. He strode in with the same arrogant swagger she remembered. His blonde hair swept back, his navy suit pristine. But the years had etched subtle lines of strain around his eyes, a hint that his charmed life wasn't as effortless as he portrayed. He hadn't seen her yet, his attention fixed on Nathan as they exchanged handshakes. Sophia's heart pounded, but she schooled her expression into one of cool neutrality. 2 years ago, Daniel's betrayal had shattered her, his affair with her best friend Lisa, his cruel words, his fists. She'd left him and Manhattan behind, rebuilding herself in the quiet of Willow Creek. Now standing in this gleaming boardroom, she was unrecognizable. Her once full curves had softened into sleek lines. Her bob haircut framed a face radiant with confidence, and her eyes held a fire that no man could dim. Daniel, it seemed, was blind to her transformation. As the meeting began, Sophia presented the briefing, her voice steady, her words precise. She outlined Novatech's vision for the partnership, her slides drawing murmurs of approval. Daniel's gaze drifted to her, his brow furrowing, as if trying to place her. When she finished, he leaned forward, a charming smile curving his lips. "Impressive presentation, Ms. Jackson," he said, his tone smooth, almost flirtatious. "You have a real talent for making numbers. Captivating." The room stilled, the air charged with his audacity. Sophia's lips tightened, her eyes narrowing. She recognized that tone, the same one he'd used to charm her years ago before the masks fell. "Thank you, Mr. Harper," she replied, her voice icy, her gaze cutting through him. "I prefer to let the work speak for itself." A ripple of amusement passed through the room, but Daniel's smile faltered, his eyes lingering on her, with a mix of curiosity and intrigue. He didn't recognize her, not yet. To him, she was just another beautiful woman, a new conquest to pursue. The thought made her stomach churn, but it also fueled her resolve. She wasn't the Sophia he'd broken. She was someone new, someone he could never touch. Nathan, seated beside her, stiffened. His jaw tightened, a subtle shift that only Sophia noticed. His eyes flicked between her and Daniel, a storm brewing in their gray depths. He said nothing, but his silence was heavy charged with an emotion she couldn't name. The meeting continued, but Sophia felt the weight of Daniel's gaze, his interest growing with each passing minute. When the session adjourned for a break, he approached her, his confidence unshaken. "Miss Jackson," he said, leaning casually against the table. "Can I steal you for a coffee? I'd love to hear more about your insights on the project." Sophia's blood ran cold, but her expression remained a mask of indifference. She stood, her movements deliberate, her height accentuated by her heels. "I'm afraid my schedule is full, Mr. Harper," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Perhaps you can discuss the project with someone more available." Daniel blinked, caught off guard by her dismissal. His charm, usually infallible, seemed to falter in the face of her cold rejection. "Maybe another time," he said, recovering with a forced smile. "There won't be another time," Sophia replied, her tone final. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking with purpose, leaving Daniel staring after her, his ego visibly bruised. Nathan, who had been speaking with another executive, watched the exchange from across the room, his hands clenched at his sides. a flicker of something dark jealousy, perhaps crossing his face. Sophia felt his gaze a magnetic pull that made her pause. When their eyes met, his expression softened, but the intensity remained a silent question lingering between them. She looked away, her heart racing. She didn't need his protection, didn't want his concern, not when she was still guarding her heart against him. As the meeting resumed, Sophia regained her composure, her focus razor sharp. But Daniel's presence was a shadow, a reminder of the pain she'd fought to overcome. She stole a glance at Nathan, who was now leading the discussion, his voice commanding his presence a quiet anchor. For a moment, she wondered what he'd seen in her exchange with Daniel, why it seemed to matter to him. The thought unsettled her stirring feelings she wasn't ready to face. When the meeting ended, Daniel lingered, his eyes tracking Sophia as she gathered her things. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low as he addressed her. "Everything all right?" He asked, his tone casual, but his eyes searching. "Fine," she said, her voice clipped. She didn't want to explain, didn't want to revisit the past in this gleaming tower of her new life. Nathan nodded, but his gaze lingered, as if he could sense the storm beneath her calm. As she left the boardroom, Sophia felt the weight of two men's eyes on her. Daniel's hungry and oblivious, and Nathan's guarded yet piercing. She straightened her shoulders, her resolve hardening. Daniel was her past, a chapter she'd closed. Nathan, however, was a mystery one that threatened to unravel her carefully rebuilt world. The air in Novatech's executive suite carried a subtle hum of ambition, the kind that fueled late-night strategy sessions and whispered deals. Sophia moved through her days with a grace that masked the storm brewing within her. Since Daniel's unexpected appearance at the boardroom meeting, her carefully constructed world felt fragile, as if one misstep could unravel everything she'd built. At 29, she was no longer the woman who had crumbled under his betrayal, but his presence was a specter, stirring memories she'd fought to bury. Yet in the midst of this unease, Nathan Caldwell's quiet intensity anchored her even as she resisted the pull of his gaze. Daniel, however, was not one to be dismissed. His encounter with Sophia in the boardroom had left him rattled, her cold rejection igniting a spark of curiosity. She was different, her poise, her beauty, the fire in her eyes. He couldn't place it at first, but something about her felt familiar, like a melody half remembered. After the meeting, he lingered in the lobby, his mind churning. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos, his fingers pausing on a snapshot from years ago. Sophia, his ex-wife, smiling softly in a sunlit park. The woman in the boardroom was a vision of transformation, but the curve of her jaw, the spark in her eyes, it was her. Shock coursed through him, followed by a twisted mix of guilt and longing. Sophia, the woman he'd once broken, had risen like a phoenix, her radiance now a beacon he couldn't ignore. He spent the next few days digging, contacting mutual acquaintances, piecing together her journey from the shattered wife he'd known to the confident professional who'd dismissed him with a single glance. The truth hit him like a blow. Sophia had not only survived him, she had thrived, and he wanted her back, not out of love, but out of a need to reclaim what he'd lost, to prove he could still control her. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped below Manhattan's skyline, casting the office in hues of amber and violet, Sophia stood by the coffee machine in the breakroom, her thoughts scattered. She wore a tailored navy dress, its simplicity accentuating her elegance, her hair swept into a low bun. The hum of the machine was a small comfort, a moment of solitude amidst her hectic day. She didn't hear Daniel approach until his voice, smooth and laced with false warmth, cut through the quiet. "Sophia," he said, leaning against the counter, his blonde hair catching the light. "I knew it was you." Her hand froze on the coffee cup, her heart lurching. She turned slowly, her eyes narrowing as she met his gaze. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice cold as steel. "I don't recall giving you permission to use my first name." Daniel's smile faltered, but he pressed on undeterred. "I was a fool, Sophia. I didn't see you back then. Not the way I should have. I'm sorry for everything. The way I treated you, Lisa. It was a mistake." His voice softened a practiced plea. "We were good together once. We could be again." Sophia's laugh was sharp, devoid of humor. "Good. Together," she echoed, stepping closer, her eyes blazing. "You broke me, Daniel. You betrayed me, humiliated me, and left scars I'll carry forever. But I'm not that woman anymore. I've moved on, and you're nothing but a shadow I've left behind." His jaw tightened, a flicker of anger breaking through his charm. "You think you're better than me now?" he said, his voice low, menacing. "Walk away, Sophia, and you'll regret it. I can make things difficult for you here in this city, anywhere." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sophia's pulse raced, but she refused to flinch. "Try it," she said, her voice steady, her gaze unyielding. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Unbeknownst to them, Nathan stood just outside the breakroom, his hand pausing on the door. He'd come to ask Sophia about a client call, but her voice, sharp, resolute, stopped him. He listened, his chest tightening, as her words painted a picture of a past he'd never imagined. Daniel's threat, low and venomous, ignited a fury in him he hadn't felt in years. Sophia's pain, her strength, it struck a chord echoing his own buried wounds. He stepped back, his mind racing, torn between intervening and respecting her ability to stand her ground. Sophia turned away from Daniel, her coffee abandoned, and strode out of the breakroom. She didn't see Nathan, didn't notice the storm in his eyes as he watched her go. She returned to her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she typed her facade of calm, barely holding. Daniel's words had shaken her, not because she feared him, but because they reminded her how far she'd come and how much she still had to protect. That evening, as the office emptied, Nathan called her into his office. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, a glittering backdrop to the tension between them. He stood by his desk, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. "Sophia," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I overheard you with Harper earlier." Her breath hitched, her defenses rising. "It was nothing," she said quickly, her tone clipped. "A conversation that's over." It didn't sound like nothing, Nathan said, stepping closer, his eyes searching hers. "He hurt you, badly, and he's still trying to." Sophia's lips parted, but no words came. She hadn't expected this Nathan of all people peering into her past. "It's in the past," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've dealt with it." Nathan's jaw clenched, a flicker of something raw in his gaze. "I know what it's like," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "To be betrayed. To rebuild after someone tears you apart. My ex. She left scars too. I don't talk about it, but I see you, Sophia. I see how strong you are." His words pierced her, unraveling the walls she'd built. She wanted to push back, to keep him at a distance, but the sincerity in his eyes held her captive. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because you deserve to know you're not alone," he said, his gaze unwavering. "And because I care more than I should." The air between them crackled, charged with unspoken truths. Sophia's heart raced, torn between fear and a longing she couldn't name. She stepped back, her voice steadying. "Thank you, Nathan. But I can handle Daniel. I can handle myself." He nodded, respecting her space, though his eyes lingered heavy with unspoken promises. As she left his office, Sophia felt the weight of her past and the pull of something new, a connection that threatened to rewrite her story, if only she could let it. The Manhattan skyline shimmered under a velvet dusk, its constellation of lights a silent witness to the storm brewing within Novatech's glass tower. Sophia stood by her office window, her reflection a portrait of resilience in a tailored burgundy dress that hugged her transformed figure. Her heart, though, was a battlefield torn between the triumph of her new life and the shadows of her past, stirred anew by Daniel's reappearance. His threats in the breakroom had rattled her, but it was Nathan's words, his unexpected glimpse into her pain, that left her reeling. She had fought to keep him at a distance, but his quiet empathy was a tide eroding her defenses. Nathan Caldwell, the enigmatic CEO, whose stormy gray eyes seemed to see through her, had become a puzzle she couldn't ignore. Their interactions, once confined to the sharp edges of professionalism, now carried a current of something deeper, an unspoken connection that both thrilled and terrified her. She had vowed never to let a man close again, not after Daniel's betrayal, but Nathan's presence was a melody she couldn't silence. And now, as she prepared to leave the office, a new twist in their story was about to unfold. Unbeknownst to Sophia, Nathan had been watching Daniel with a predator's focus. The moment he overheard Daniel's threat in the breakroom, a fury had ignited in him, one that burned hotter than mere professional rivalry. Daniel Harper, with his smug charm and veiled threats, was a threat not just to Sophia, but to the fragile hope Nathan hadn't realized he'd been nurturing. He acted swiftly, decisively, his power as Novatech's CEO, a weapon he wielded without hesitation. By the next morning, he had canceled the billion-dollar partnership with Apex Innovations, Daniel's company, citing strategic misalignment. But Nathan didn't stop there. He leveraged his network, planting whispers of financial instability and mismanagement at Apex, rumors that spread like wildfire through Wall Street. By midday, Apex's stock plummeted, a free fall that left Daniel scrambling to salvage his empire. Sophia learned of the fallout through a flurry of emails and hushed conversations in the office. Colleagues buzzed about Apex's collapse, speculating on the cause, but none connected it to her. She sat at her desk, her tablet glowing with news alerts, her mind racing. Daniel's downfall felt like justice, a poetic end to the man who had once broken her. Yet a nagging unease settled in her chest. The timing was too precise, the blow too calculated. She glanced at Nathan's office, its glass walls revealing him in a heated call, his jaw set, his posture commanding. Had he orchestrated this? And if so, why? That evening, Nathan called her into his office. The city lights cast a golden glow across the room, softening the edges of his sleek desk and leather chairs. He stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the skyline, his tie discarded, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "Sophia," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "We need to talk." She closed the door behind her, her heart pounding. "About the Apex deal?" she asked, her tone guarded. "It's all over the news. Their stock is crashing." Nathan turned, his eyes meeting hers, a storm of emotions swirling within them. "I canceled the partnership," he admitted, his voice steady but heavy. "And I made sure the market knew Apex wasn't worth the risk." Sophia's breath caught, her suspicions confirmed. "Why?" she asked, stepping closer, her eyes searching his. "That deal was worth billions. You don't just walk away from something like that." He hesitated, a rare crack in his composed facade. "Because of you," he said, finally, the words raw, unguarded. "I heard what he said to you, Sophia. The threats, the way he tried to manipulate you. I couldn't let him near you again, not after what he did." Her heart stuttered, a mix of shock and something softer, warmer. "You did this for me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Nathan, you didn't have to." "I did," he interrupted, stepping closer, his presence filling the space between them. I've been where you are, Sophia. Betrayed. Broken. My ex, she cheated, lied, used me to climb her own ladder. It closed me off, made me think I was better alone. But then you came along. His voice softened, his eyes tracing her face. You're different. Your strength, your fire, it's changed me. You've made me want to feel again, to trust again. Sophia's breath hitched, her walls crumbling under the weight of his confession. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, a mirror to her own scars. Nathan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I'm not ready. After Daniel, I'm scared. Scared of falling, of hurting again. He nodded, his gaze steady, unwavering. I know, he said, his voice a gentle caress. I'm not asking you to rush. I just needed you to know. Needed you to see me, not the CEO, not the man in the elevator, but me. The air between them crackled, charged with a raw intimacy that made her chest ache. She wanted to step back to rebuild her defenses, but his sincerity held her captive. For the first time, she saw not just Nathan Caldwell, the billionaire, with a reputation for cold precision, but Nathan, the man who had fought for her in ways she hadn't asked for. I see you, she said finally, her voice soft but steady. But I need time, Nathan. I need to trust myself before I can trust anyone else. He smiled, a small, tender curve of his lips that made her heart skip. Take all the time you need, he said. I'm not going anywhere. As she left his office, the city sprawling below, Sophia felt a shift within her. Nathan's secret, his bold move against Daniel, was a declaration not just of protection, but of something deeper, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She wasn't ready to fall, not yet, but for the first time, she wondered if she could. The rain lashed against the windows of the small seaside inn, a relentless symphony of nature's fury that cocooned the world in shades of gray. Sophia stood by the window of their shared suite, her silhouette framed against the storm-tossed Atlantic, the wind howling as if echoing the tumult in her heart. At 29, she had rebuilt herself from the ashes of betrayal, her elegance and strength a testament to her resilience. Yet here in this remote corner of Maine, on a business trip with Nathan Caldwell, she felt the edges of her carefully constructed world softening, blurring under the weight of his presence. The trip to Portland had been planned meticulously, a critical negotiation with a tech startup eager to partner with Novatech. Sophia, as Nathan's personal assistant, had orchestrated every detail: flights, presentations, even the quaint inn they'd chosen for its proximity to the startup's headquarters. But nature had other plans. A sudden nor'easter had swept in, grounding flights and closing roads, stranding them in this cozy, weathered inn by the coast. The world outside was chaos, but within these walls, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of emotions too long suppressed. The suite was modest but warm, its wooden beams and nautical decor exuding a charm that felt like a step out of time. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a golden glow across the room, where Sophia and Nathan sat on opposite ends of a plush sofa, a tray of tea and scones between them. Sophia wore a soft cream sweater and jeans, her hair loose, curling gently around her shoulders. The casual attire felt intimate, a stark contrast to the polished professionalism of their Manhattan office. Nathan, in a charcoal sweater and slacks, looked less like the untouchable CEO and more like a man wrestling with thoughts he couldn't voice. The silence between them was heavy, not with tension, but with possibility. Sophia sipped her tea, her eyes tracing the flickering flames, avoiding Nathan's gaze. His confession days ago, his admission of his own betrayal, his bold move against Daniel, had shifted something in her. She had seen vulnerability in his stormy gray eyes, a crack in the armor of the man who commanded boardrooms with ease. Yet fear held her back, a whisper of her past, warning her against trusting too soon. Nathan broke the silence first, his voice low, almost lost in the storm's roar. "This place," he said, gesturing to the room. "It reminds me of my grandfather's cabin. We'd spend summers there, just the two of us, fishing and telling stories by the fire. It was the only time I felt free." Sophia glanced at him, surprised by the intimacy of his words. Free from what she asked, her voice soft, curious. He leaned back, his gaze distant. Expectations. The weight of being a Caldwell. "My family built an empire, but it came with chains, duty, perfection, never showing weakness." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "You make me feel like I can breathe, Sophia. Like I don't have to be that man all the time." Her heart skipped, the sincerity in his voice unraveling her defenses. She set her tea down, her hands trembling slightly. "You don't know me, Nathan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not really. My past. It's a mess. I'm still figuring out who I am." "Then let me know you," he said, leaning forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "Not the assistant, not the woman who walked away from a nightmare, but you. The one who loves jazz, who lights up a room with her laugh, who's stronger than she realizes." Sophia's breath caught her chest, aching with the weight of his words. She wanted to push back, to retreat behind her walls. But the firelight danced in his eyes, and she saw something she hadn't before, hope raw and unguarded. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I trusted once, and it broke me. I don't know if I can do it again." Nathan reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm, his warmth grounding her. "I'm not him, Sophia," he said, his voice steady, a vow woven into every syllable. "I want to protect you, to cherish you, not because you need it, but because you deserve it. You've changed me, made me want to be better, to open my heart again." The world seemed to still, the storm outside fading to a distant hum. Sophia's eyes glistened, her fear warring with a longing she could no longer deny. His hand in hers felt like an anchor, a promise of safety in a world that had once been so cruel. She leaned forward, her heart leading where her mind hesitated, and pressed a soft kiss to his lips, a fleeting, tender touch that held 1,000 unspoken words. Nathan froze, his breath catching, then deepened the kiss, his hand cupping her cheek with a reverence that made her heart ache. It was brief, a moment suspended in time, but it carried the weight of a turning point. When they parted, Sophia's cheeks flushed, her eyes searching his. "I don't know what this means," she whispered, her voice raw. "It means we're starting," Nathan said, his thumb brushing her cheek. "No rush, no pressure. Just us figuring it out together." The fire crackled. The storm raged on. But in that small inn, Sophia felt a spark ignite, a fragile, beautiful hope that maybe, just maybe, she could love again. The Manhattan skyline glowed like a tapestry of dreams, its lights twinkling against the indigo dusk as Sophia stepped out of Novatech's glass tower. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the promise of new beginnings. At 29, she was a vision of grace and strength, her tailored cobalt blazer accentuating the confidence she'd reclaimed. The business trip to Maine, where a storm had stranded her with Nathan Caldwell, had been a turning point. Their fleeting kiss by the inn's firelight had ignited a spark she could no longer deny. Now, weeks later, they were no longer just colleagues. They were something more, something real. Sophia and Nathan had returned to New York with a quiet understanding, their relationship blossoming in stolen moments, late-night coffees, after long meetings, walks through Central Park, where their hands brushed, and conversations that peeled back layers of their guarded hearts. Nathan was patient, his stormy gray eyes holding a tenderness that disarmed her fears. Sophia, though cautious, felt her walls crumble, replaced by a trust she hadn't thought possible. They were dating now, officially their connection, a delicate dance of hope and vulnerability. But the past, as always, lingered like a shadow. Daniel Harper. Sophia's ex-husband had not faded quietly. His company Apex Innovations was in ruins, its stock a ghost of its former value after Nathan's calculated moves. The business world had turned its back on him, his once charmed reputation now tarnished by whispers of mismanagement. Desperate and bitter, Daniel sought to reclaim some semblance of power. One gray afternoon, as Sophia left a meeting, he cornered her outside Novatech's lobby, his face a mask of false contrition. "Sophia," he said, his voice dripping with a charm she no longer believed, "I made mistakes, but you can't erase what we had. Come back to me, or I'll make sure everyone knows the truth about you, your past, your pain." Her heart thudded, but her gaze was steel. "The truth," she said, her voice low, cutting. "The truth is, you lost me, Daniel. You have no power here. Not anymore. Spread your rumors. No one will listen to a man who's lost everything." She walked away, her heels clicking with finality, leaving Daniel speechless in the fading light. His threats were empty, his voice drowned out by the industry's disdain. Sophia felt no fear, only a quiet triumph. She had faced her past and emerged stronger, her heart no longer his to wound. At Novatech, Sophia's star continued to rise. Her work as Nathan's assistant had showcased her brilliance, her strategic insights, her ability to streamline complex projects, her knack for inspiring teams. When a senior project manager position opened, Nathan didn't hesitate. "You've earned this, Sophia," he said in a private meeting, his voice warm with pride. "You're not just my assistant, you're a leader." The promotion was a milestone, a testament to her talent. As project manager, Sophia spearheaded a groundbreaking AI initiative, her vision earning accolades from clients and colleagues alike. She thrived in the role, her confidence a beacon that lit up boardrooms. Nathan watched her with a quiet awe, his admiration deepening into something that felt like forever. 2 years later, the scene had shifted, softened by time and love. Novatech's headquarters buzzed with its usual energy, but Sophia's office was a haven of warmth, adorned with photos and mementos of a life well lived. On a sunny afternoon, she sat at her desk reviewing project timelines when Nathan appeared, his suit slightly rumpled, a playful grin on his face. In his arms was a tiny bundle, a 6-month-old girl, her curls as dark as Sophia's, her eyes a stormy gray like her father's. Sophia looked up, her heart swelling, and reached for their son, his twin, who gurgled happily in her arms. Their twins, Amara and Elias, were the unexpected joy of their union, born a year after their wedding. A quiet ceremony in Willow Creek, surrounded by the people who had helped Sophia rebuild. The twins were a handful, their laughter filling the couple's Upper West Side apartment, where jazz records spun late into the night and books lined every shelf. Sophia and Nathan were partners in every sense, balancing work and family, with a harmony that felt like a miracle. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of coral and gold, Sophia and Nathan stood on their balcony, each cradling a sleeping twin. The city hummed below, a symphony of life that had once broken Sophia, but now celebrated her triumph. Nathan's arm slid around her waist, his touch a quiet promise. "You've given me everything," he murmured, his lips brushing her temple. "A family, a home, a reason to believe in love again." Sophia leaned into him, her heart full. "And you gave me courage," she whispered, her eyes on the sunset. "To trust, to love, to be me." They stood in silence, the twins' soft breaths mingling with the city's pulse, the horizon, a canvas of their shared future. Sophia, once shattered, had woven her pain into strength, her love into a legacy. With Nathan by her side, their children in their arms, she knew this was her happily ever after, a story written not by fate, but by her own unyielding spirit.